The job posting appeared on the Mercenary networks at exactly 800 Galactic Standard Time. Within minutes, dozens of the most feared warrior species in known space had accessed the file. The pay was astronomical, enough credits to buy a small moon. The client was listed as the Hegemony Trade Consortium, one of the most powerful economic forces in the galaxy. Krexter, a 7-foot-tall Vorthak warrior covered in natural armor plating, read through the contract details on his ship's display. His species had dominated battlefields for over 3,000 years. Their reputation for ruthless efficiency was legendary. He scrolled through the mission parameters with growing interest. Eliminate human military presence on Kepler 442b, he read aloud in his gravelly voice. Secure mining operations, standard rules of engagement. His mandibles clicked in what passed for a smile among his kind. Humans were a relatively new species to the galactic community, having only achieved faster-than-light travel 200 years ago. They were considered soft, weak creatures who relied too heavily on technology and diplomacy. This would be easy money. Across the galaxy, similar conversations were taking place. Zeph Ironskill, a reptilian Draknari mercenary captain, examined the same contract aboard her dreadnought. Her species had evolved from apex predators on a world where everything tried to kill everything else. They had turned that natural aggression into a profitable business model. Humans again, she hissed to her second-in-command. These mammals think they can claim territory just because they plant a flag and build a few colonies. Time to remind them how the galaxy really works. The Kepler 442b system was strategically important. The planet contained vast deposits of quantum crystalline structures, a rare mineral essential for faster-than-light communication and travel. When human colonists had discovered the deposits, they'd established a mining operation and a defensive garrison. The Hegemony Trade Consortium wanted those minerals, and they'd decided that purchasing the claims through legal channels was too expensive and time-consuming. Commander Sarah Chen of the Human Colonial Defense Force received the intelligence briefing while reviewing supply manifests in her office on Kepler 442b. The orbital sensors had detected multiple ships entering the system's outer perimeter. The signatures matched known mercenary vessels from at least 6 different species. "Ma'am," her aide, Lieutenant Morrison, said, "we're looking at approximately 2,000 hostiles, mixed species. Best intelligence suggests they're here for the quantum crystal mines." Chen looked up from her tablet. She was a compact woman in her 40s, with graying hair and the kind of steady gaze that came from 30 years of military service. Her garrison consisted of just 300 Marines, mostly young soldiers on their first off-world deployment. "Have they made contact yet?" she asked. "No, ma'am, but they're not trying to hide their presence either. Long-range scans show they're heavily armed, dreadnought-class vessels with full battle complements." Chen stood and walked to the window of her command center. Outside, she could see the mining facility stretching across the valley floor. Thousands of human civilians worked there, families who had come to build a new life on this frontier world. They trusted her to keep them safe. "Send a message to Earth Command," she said. "Request immediate reinforcements. Then put the base on full alert and begin evacuation protocols for non-essential civilian personnel." "Ma'am," Morrison hesitated, "reinforcements are 6 months away at best. The nearest fleet is dealing with the Centauri situation." Chen nodded grimly. She'd expected as much. "Then we'll have to make do with what we have." On the lead mercenary vessel, a massive battle cruiser called the Blood Harvest, the various mercenary captains held a virtual conference. Representatives from 8 different species appeared as holograms around a tactical display showing Kepler 442b and its defenses. Krexter's image gestured with one clawed hand. "The human defensive installations are minimal. Standard orbital platforms, ground-based anti-aircraft systems, and what appears to be a single military base with perhaps 300 soldiers." "My scans confirm those numbers," added Captain Gorvak, a hulking Brondhan whose species resembled walking mountains of muscle and bone. "This should be completed within 1 standard day, perhaps less." Zeph Ironskill's hologram flickered slightly as her ship systems updated. "I suggest we maintain the standard mercenary protocols. Overwhelming force, quick strike, minimal casualties on our side. The humans will surrender once they realize they're outmatched." The conference participants shared what passed for laughter among their various species. The idea of humans putting up significant resistance was almost amusing. Most galactic species viewed humans as clever but physically weak, better suited for diplomatic solutions than actual warfare. "There is one detail we should discuss," said Captain Enthara, a spider-like Zelarian whose species had evolved perfect tactical coordination through hive-mind communication. "Human military doctrine emphasizes what they call asymmetric warfare. They may attempt irregular tactics." Krexter's mandibles clicked dismissively. "Hiding behind rocks and taking potshots? Let them. Our armor can withstand their primitive kinetic weapons, and our sensors can track them anywhere on the planet." "Agreed," Gorvak rumbled. "The sooner we finish this, the sooner we collect payment. I propose a direct assault at dawn local time. Orbital bombardment to suppress their anti-aircraft systems, followed by atmospheric insertion of ground forces." The plan was approved unanimously. 8 mercenary fleets would coordinate the attack, bringing overwhelming firepower against a small human garrison that was months away from any hope of reinforcement. By every calculation, it would be a massacre. Down on the planet's surface, Commander Chen stood in her war room studying the tactical displays. Her senior staff surrounded a holographic map showing the positions of the approaching enemy fleets. "They're not even trying to hide their intentions," said Major Rodriguez, her second-in-command. "Classic overwhelming force doctrine. They expect us to fold immediately." Chen touched a control, and the display zoomed in on the human defensive positions. 300 Marines, 42 defensive positions, 6 orbital platforms, and a civilian population of nearly 50,000 people who were depending on them. "What about the evacuation?" she asked. "We've managed to get about 15,000 civilians to the underground shelters," reported Lieutenant Morrison. "But the mining operation employs too many people. We can't evacuate everyone before they arrive." Chen studied the numbers again. Against any reasonable military doctrine, her position was hopeless. 300 soldiers against 2,000 experienced mercenaries from species that had been fighting wars for millennia before humans had even invented gunpowder. "Ma'am," said Major Rodriguez quietly, "Earth Command regulations allow for strategic withdrawal when faced with overwhelming odds. We could evacuate with the civilians, regroup, and wait for reinforcements." Chen looked at her officers. They were all young, most of them serving their first off-world deployment. She'd trained them, fought alongside them, watched them grow from nervous recruits into competent soldiers. They deserved to know what she was thinking. "That's certainly an option," she said slowly. "We could run, save our own lives and most of the civilian population. Let the mercenaries take what they want and hope Earth can negotiate some kind of settlement later." The room was silent. Everyone understood the implications. The quantum crystal mines represented one of humanity's most valuable off-world assets. Losing them would set back human expansion efforts by decades. "But there's another option," Chen continued. "We stay, we fight, we show these mercenaries that humans aren't as easy to push around as they think." Sergeant Williams, a grizzled veteran who'd served with Chen for over a decade, spoke up. "Ma'am, with respect, the math doesn't work. We're outnumbered 6-1 by species that are bigger, stronger, and more experienced than us." Chen smiled grimly. "That's true, Sergeant, but they're making the same mistake that a lot of people make when they look at humans. They're only seeing what we are, not what we can become when we're pushed into a corner." She activated another display, showing detailed intelligence files on each of the mercenary species now approaching their planet. "The Vorthak are stronger than us, but they rely heavily on their natural armor. The Draknari are faster, but their tactics haven't evolved much beyond their predator instincts. The Brondans are tough, but they're used to steamrolling inferior opponents." "What's your point, ma'am?" asked Rodriguez. "My point is that they're all thinking like apex predators who have never had to adapt. They've been at the top of the food chain for so long, they've forgotten how to deal with prey that fights back smart instead of just fighting back hard." Chen turned to face her staff directly. "I'm not ordering anyone to stay. This is a volunteer mission. But if we're going to do this, we need to fight like humans. We use every advantage we have, our adaptability, our willingness to try things that seem impossible, and our absolute refusal to give up when everything looks hopeless." The room was quiet for several long moments. Then Sergeant Williams stepped forward. "I've been following you into impossible situations for 15 years, ma'am, not about to stop now." One by one, the other officers and non-commissioned officers voiced their agreement. Chen felt a mixture of pride and terror. They were about to attempt something that would either become legendary or get them all killed. "All right then," she said. "Let's get to work. We have about 18 hours before they arrive, and we need to prepare a welcome that they'll never forget." As her staff dispersed to begin preparations, Chen remained alone in the war room, staring at the tactical display. The approaching mercenary fleets showed as red dots moving inexorably toward Kepler 442b. Her own forces appeared as tiny blue icons scattered across the planet's surface. She opened a communication channel to Earth Command, knowing that her message wouldn't arrive for several hours due to the distances involved. "Command, this is Colonial Defense Base Kepler 442b. We are about to engage superior enemy forces in defense of the quantum crystal mining operations. If you receive this message, know that we fought with honor and gave everything we had to protect human interests in this sector." She paused, then added, "Tell our families that we chose to stand and fight because that's what humans do when backed into a corner. We adapt, we overcome, and we never give up." Commander Sarah Chen, Human Colonial Defense Force, signing off. As night fell over Kepler 442b, the human defenders worked frantically to prepare their positions. They had less than a day to turn a routine garrison into a fortress that could withstand an assault by some of the most dangerous military forces in the galaxy. Above them, the stars moved slowly across the sky, and among those stars, 8 fleets of alien mercenaries continued their approach, confident in their overwhelming superiority and planning an easy victory. Neither side yet understood that they were about to participate in a battle that would fundamentally change how the galaxy viewed humanity. The mercenaries saw only weak mammals ripe for conquest. The humans saw only an impossible situation that required an impossible solution. By morning, one of those perspectives would be proven catastrophically wrong. Dawn broke over Kepler 442b with deceptive calm. The twin suns cast long shadows across the valley where the quantum crystal mining facility stretched for kilometers in every direction. In the distance, the jagged peaks of the Meridian mountain range caught the early light, their crystalline deposits glittering like scattered diamonds. Commander Chen stood on the observation deck of her command bunker, watching the sunrise through reinforced transparent aluminum. Around her, the base hummed with quiet activity as her Marines completed their final preparations. They had worked through the night, transforming their defensive positions in ways that would have puzzled traditional military strategists. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Morrison approached with a steaming cup of coffee, "orbital sensors show the enemy fleets beginning their final approach. ETA approximately 4 hours." Chen accepted the coffee gratefully. She hadn't slept in 36 hours, but adrenaline and determination were keeping her focused. "Any response from Earth Command?" "Negative, ma'am. We're still too far out for real-time communication. But the last transmission confirmed that reinforcements are at least 6 months away." Chen nodded and took a sip of the bitter coffee. Around the base, she could see her Marines moving through their assignments with practiced efficiency. They were scared. She could see it in their movements, hear it in the occasional nervous joke over the comm channels. But they were staying focused on their jobs. "Morrison," she said quietly, "I want you to know that what we're about to attempt, it goes against everything they taught us at the Academy. Conventional military wisdom says we should have evacuated 12 hours ago." The young lieutenant straightened slightly. "Ma'am, with respect, conventional military wisdom was written by people who never had to defend humanity's first major off-world mining operation against alien mercenaries." Chen smiled despite the gravity of their situation. "That's exactly the kind of thinking we're going to need today." Across the valley, the mining facility continued its operations with skeleton crews. Most of the civilian workers had been evacuated to underground shelters, but essential personnel remained to maintain the quantum crystal extraction equipment. The mining operation represented years of human investment and the key to expanding further into space. Losing it would be a devastating blow to human expansion efforts. High above the planet, the mercenary fleets dropped out of faster-than-light travel and began forming attack formations. The sight would have been impressive to anyone witnessing it. Dozens of massive warships representing the military might of 8 different species, all converging on a single world. Aboard the Blood Harvest, Captain Krexter reviewed the final attack plans with his command staff. The Vorthak battlecruiser served as the flagship for the combined mercenary operation, coordinating the efforts of the other fleets. Orbital bombardment commences in 3 hours, his tactical officer reported. Primary targets are the human anti-aircraft installations and orbital defense platforms. Secondary targets are the military base command structures. Krexter studied the tactical display showing Kepler 442b below them. The human positions were clearly marked, pathetically small defensive installations scattered around the mining facility and the single military base. What about the mining equipment itself? Our employer specifically requested minimal damage to the extraction facilities, replied his communications officer. The goal is to capture the operation intact, not destroy it. Understood, Krexter's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. And the human responses to our presence? None, sir. They appear to be maintaining communication silence. Long-range scans show normal activity patterns at their base. This was typical, Krexter reflected. Most species attempted to negotiate when faced with overwhelming force. The fact that the humans weren't even trying to communicate suggested they had accepted the hopelessness of their situation and were preparing to surrender. On Captain Zeph Ironscale's dreadnought Savage Tide, the Draknari mercenary was reviewing intelligence reports with her own command team. Her species prided themselves on understanding their prey before striking, a trait left over from their evolution as apex predators. The human commander is listed as Sarah Chen, her intelligence officer hissed in the Draknari language. 30 years military service, mostly garrison and peacekeeping assignments. No major combat experience against non-human forces. Typical mammal career path, Zeph replied dismissively. They promote based on administrative competence rather than warrior prowess. What about her forces? Standard human colonial marines, light infantry with basic heavy weapons support. Their equipment is adequate but not exceptional. No indication of special training or elite units. Zeph's forked tongue flicked out briefly, tasting the recycled air of her ship's bridge. They will likely attempt to delay our advance with defensive positions while evacuating their civilians. Standard mammalian behavior, protect the weak while the strong retreat. In the command center of the Brondhen heavy cruiser Stone Breaker Captain Gorvak was taking a more direct approach to planning. His species believed in simple, overwhelming force applied without subtlety or mercy. We smash their defenses, we take their planet, we collect our payment, he rumbled to his officers, each of whom stood nearly 8 feet tall and massed as much as a small ground vehicle. Any questions? There were none. The Brondhen way of war hadn't changed in millennia because it didn't need to change. When you were strong enough to break through any defense, tactics became secondary to raw power. Back on Kepler 442b, Commander Chen was conducting her final briefing with her senior staff. The war room had been reconfigured overnight, with additional communications equipment and tactical displays showing not just the immediate area around their base, but detailed maps of the entire valley and surrounding terrain. The orbital bombardment will begin in approximately 2 hours, she announced to her assembled officers. Based on standard mercenary doctrine, they'll target our anti-aircraft systems first, then our command structures, followed by a full-scale ground assault. Major Rodriguez studied the tactical display. Ma'am, we've done everything we can to harden our positions, but a sustained orbital bombardment will eventually break through our defenses. You're absolutely right, Chen agreed. Which is why we're not going to be in our defensive positions when the bombardment starts. The room fell silent. Sergeant Williams was the first to speak. Ma'am, if we abandon our prepared positions, we lose every defensive advantage we have. Chen moved to the central tactical display and highlighted several areas of terrain around the valley. We lose our static defensive advantages, yes, but we gain something more important, mobility and unpredictability. She zoomed in on the mountainous terrain surrounding the mining facility. The Meridian Mountains contain hundreds of natural caves and tunnel systems, many of which connect to the underground areas beneath the mining facility. Over the past 12 hours, our engineering teams have been modifying those tunnels and creating new connections. Lieutenant Morrison looked confused. Ma'am, are you suggesting we conduct the entire defense from underground? Not exactly, Chen replied. I'm suggesting we conduct a defense that uses the one advantage humans have always had over stronger, faster, more dangerous opponents, our ability to adapt our environment to suit our needs. She activated a new display showing cross-sections of the tunnel systems. Every human war in our history has been won by the side that best adapted to changing circumstances. When we couldn't match the enemy's strength, we changed the rules of engagement. The display now showed the mining facility from an underground perspective. Dozens of interconnected tunnels, maintenance shafts, and modified cave systems created a three-dimensional battlefield that existed entirely below ground level. The mercenaries are expecting to fight human colonial marines, Chen explained. They're not expecting to fight what we're about to become, an entire human population that refuses to give up and has had 18 hours to prepare the battlefield. Major Rodriguez was beginning to understand. You're talking about turning the entire valley into a fortress, not just our base, but everything. Exactly. Chen highlighted different sections of the underground network. We have civilian engineers who know every inch of the mining tunnels. We have maintenance workers who understand the facility's infrastructure better than anyone. We have miners who can move through underground spaces that would challenge trained soldiers. She paused, letting the implications sink in. We're not just 300 Marines defending against 2,000 mercenaries. We're 50,000 humans who have decided to make this planet too expensive to take. The room buzzed with conversation as the officers began to grasp the scope of what Chen was proposing. This wasn't traditional military doctrine. It was something closer to total population resistance. Ma'am, Sergeant Williams said slowly, this is going to require coordination between military and civilian personnel on a scale we've never attempted. Which is why we've been training together for the past 12 hours, Chen replied. Every civilian who volunteered to stay has been assigned to a mixed military-civilian team. Engineers working with combat engineers, miners working with sappers, maintenance workers working with communications specialists. She activated another display showing personnel assignments. We're not fighting as separate military and civilian populations anymore. For the duration of this engagement, we're all defenders of this world. The orbital bombardment began exactly on schedule. The mercenary fleets had positioned themselves in high orbit, safely beyond the range of human anti-aircraft systems. Their weapons systems were designed to devastate planetary defenses while minimizing damage to valuable infrastructure below. The first salvo targeted the 6 orbital defense platforms that protected the mining facility. The platforms had been built to defend against pirates and small raiding forces, not the concentrated firepower of 8 mercenary fleets. They lasted approximately 40 seconds. The second salvo targeted the obvious anti-aircraft installations around the human military base. Massive energy beams lanced down from space, turning defensive positions into craters of melted rock and twisted metal. Aboard the Blood Harvest, Captain Krexter watched the bombardment with satisfaction. His tactical display showed each target being systematically destroyed. Human responses. None detected, sir. No return fire, no communications, no movement from their base. This was proceeding exactly as expected. The humans had clearly recognized the futility of resistance and were waiting for the bombardment to end so they could surrender. The third salvo targeted the command structures of the human base itself. Powerful particle beams struck the main administration building, the communications center, and what appeared to be the primary military command post. Direct hits on all command targets, reported the tactical officer, scanning for secondary explosions and structural damage. But something was wrong. The buildings had been destroyed, certainly, but the secondary explosions and fires that should have followed were minimal. It looked almost as if the facilities had been deliberately emptied before the bombardment. Sir, the communications officer interrupted, we're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. Krexter straightened in his command chair. Finally, put it through. The voice that came through the communications system was clearly human, female, calm, and speaking in clear galactic standard. Attention, mercenary forces. This is Commander Sarah Chen of the Human Colonial Defense Force. I regret to inform you that your bombardment has failed to achieve its objectives. A murmur ran through the bridge of the Blood Harvest. Krexter activated his communications system. This is Captain Krexter, commanding the mercenary operation against Kepler 442b. Commander Chen, your defensive positions have been destroyed. I am authorized to accept your surrender and guarantee the safety of your civilian population. There was a pause, then what sounded almost like laughter from the human commander. Captain Krexter, I appreciate the offer, but I'm afraid you've misunderstood our situation. We haven't been defeated. We've just gotten started. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge of the Blood Harvest in confused silence. From her position deep in the tunnel system beneath the mining facility, Commander Chen looked up at a tactical display that showed the mercenary fleets in orbit above them. Around her, human defenders, military and civilian alike, monitored communications and sensor networks that extended throughout the underground complex. Phase 1 complete, she announced over the internal communications system. All personnel are safely underground, and the enemy believes they've destroyed our command capabilities. Initiate Phase 2. Across the valley, at hundreds of locations that the mercenary fleets couldn't see from orbit, hatches opened and human defenders emerged from underground positions. They moved quickly and silently, taking up positions in locations that hadn't existed 18 hours earlier. The battle for Kepler 442b was about to begin in earnest, and the mercenaries were about to discover that they had severely underestimated both the determination and the ingenuity of the humans they had come to conquer. The first wave of mercenary dropships descended through Kepler 442b's atmosphere like falling stars, their heat shields glowing orange-red as they cut through the thin air. From orbit, the landing zones appeared perfect, open ground near the mining facility with clear sight lines and no obvious defensive positions. Captain Krexter observed the deployment from his ship's tactical center, watching as 800 warriors from different species prepared for what should be a routine conquest. The first wave consisted primarily of Vorthak shock troops and Draknari hunters, species known for their ability to quickly overwhelm lesser opponents. Landing zones are clear, reported his tactical officer. No energy signatures, no movement, no defensive fire. The humans appear to have completely abandoned the surface. Krexter's mandibles clicked in what might have been disappointment. He had hoped for at least token resistance to make the operation more interesting. Very well. Signal all units to proceed with standard occupation protocols. The dropships landed in perfect formation, disgorging their contents onto the rocky surface of Kepler 442b. Within minutes, 800 of the galaxy's most feared warriors had established a perimeter around the landing zone and were advancing toward the human mining facility. Squad leader Thakner of the Vorthak 4th Assault Division led his warriors across the open ground with practiced efficiency. His species had conquered dozens of worlds using identical tactics. The Vorthak were natural tanks. Their thick, chitinous armor could deflect most small arms fire, and their savage close combat abilities made them nearly unstoppable in direct assault. No contacts, he reported over the tactical network as his squad approached the outer perimeter of the mining facility. The mammals appear to have completely evacuated. Behind him, his warriors spread out in standard formation, their heavy weapons scanning for targets that never appeared. The mining facility loomed ahead of them, a maze of industrial buildings, processing plants, and extraction equipment that stretched for kilometers in every direction. Movement, called out one of his warriors, pointing toward a cluster of buildings near the facility's main entrance. Thakner focused his enhanced vision on the area and saw several human figures moving between the structures. They appeared to be civilians, workers in mining gear who were scrambling to evacuate equipment. Standard protocol, Thakner ordered. Capture and secure, no unnecessary casualties. His warriors advanced toward the buildings with confidence. Humans were known to be weak physically, relying on technology rather than natural combat ability. A few dozen workers would surrender immediately when faced with Vorthak assault troops. The first indication that something was wrong came when the ground beneath Thakner's lead warrior suddenly gave way, dropping the 8-foot-tall Vorthak into a concealed pit that definitely hadn't been visible on their orbital reconnaissance. "Man-trap," Thakner shouted, but even as he spoke, more of his warriors were disappearing into hidden holes that seemed to open up everywhere around them. The humans they had been pursuing vanished into buildings that apparently contained hidden passages, and suddenly, the mining facility erupted with defensive fire from positions that hadn't existed during the orbital bombardment. "Contact," Thakner roared into his communicator. "We are taking fire from concealed positions. Humans have prepared extensive defensive." His transmission cut off as a human explosive device detonated directly beneath his position, launching the massive Vorthak warrior 15 feet into the air. Similar scenes were playing out across the entire landing zone. Captain Zeph Ironscale's Draknari hunters, who prided themselves on their ability to track and eliminate prey with supernatural efficiency, found themselves being hunted by humans who seemed to appear and disappear at will throughout the industrial maze. "This is Hunter Pack 7, hissed one of her squad leaders over the communications network. "We are pursuing human forces through the processing facility, but they keep vanishing into structures that should be solid walls." Zeph's forked tongue flicked out in agitation. Her species had evolved perfect predator instincts over millions of years, yet these weak mammals seemed to be evading her warriors with ease. "Explain vanishing," pack leader. "They enter buildings through normal doorways, but when we follow, the buildings are empty. No exits, no hiding places, no trace of where they went." Captain Gorvak's Brondhan heavy infantry was having similar problems. His warriors were designed to smash through defensive positions with overwhelming force, but there were no defensive positions to smash. Instead, human defenders would appear, engage his troops briefly, then disappear underground before his warriors could close to combat range. "This is not standard human tactics," Gorvak rumbled to his command staff aboard his ship. "They are fighting like vermin, hiding in holes, striking and retreating." From her position in the underground command center, Commander Chen watched the tactical displays showing the progress of the mercenary ground forces. The tunnels around her hummed with activity as human defenders moved through passages that connected every major building in the facility. "Report," she called out to her communications officer. "All defensive teams are engaging according to plan," reported Sergeant Williams from his position at the tactical console. "Enemy forces are advancing into the facility, but they're taking casualties and their progress is slowing." Chen nodded with satisfaction. The plan was working exactly as they had hoped. During the 18 hours since learning of the approaching mercenary fleets, every human on the planet had worked together to turn the mining facility into something completely different from what it appeared to be from orbit. The underground tunnel system that connected the mining operations had been expanded and modified to include passages linking every building, every defensive position, and every piece of important equipment. Human defenders could move from one location to another without ever exposing themselves to orbital surveillance or direct attack. More importantly, the civilians who knew every inch of the facility's layout had spent the night creating hundreds of concealed positions, hidden passages, and carefully camouflaged traps throughout the industrial complex. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Morrison approached with a status report, "the engineering teams report that Phase 2 modifications are complete. The mercenaries are now inside our defensive perimeter." Chen smiled grimly. "Excellent. Signal all teams to initiate Phase 3. Across the mining facility, the nature of the engagement suddenly changed. What had been a series of isolated skirmishes between human defenders and mercenary assault teams transformed into something much more coordinated and deadly. Thakner had managed to extract his squad from the initial trap zone and was advancing more cautiously through the processing facility when the walls around him suddenly came alive with defensive fire. But this wasn't random shooting. It was precisely coordinated to drive his warriors toward specific areas. "They're hurting us," he realized with growing alarm, speaking into his communicator. "The humans are using coordinated fire to control our movement patterns." Even as he spoke, his warriors were being forced into a narrow corridor between two large processing buildings. Thakner's combat instincts, honed through decades of warfare, screamed warnings, but there was no other route available. The explosion that followed wasn't large enough to kill his armored warriors, but it brought down enough debris to trap half his squad. As his remaining soldiers worked to dig out their comrades, human defenders appeared from concealed positions and began targeting them with weapons specifically designed to exploit weaknesses in Vorthak armor. "How do they know our armor specifications?" Thakner demanded, but nobody had an answer. The answer was in the underground command center, where human intelligence officers had spent the night analyzing every piece of available data about the mercenary species they were facing. Chen's staff included xenobiologists, engineers, and weapons specialists who had worked together to identify vulnerabilities in each enemy species. Vorthak armor is nearly impervious to frontal assault, reported Dr. Patricia Yamamoto, the expedition's senior xenobiologist. But the joints are vulnerable to shaped charges, and their respiratory systems can't handle certain chemical compounds. Draknari reflexes are incredibly fast, added Chief Engineer Rodriguez, but their infrared vision has trouble with artificial heat sources, and their hunting instincts make them predictable when pursuing prey. Brondhen are nearly indestructible in direct combat, said weapons specialist Thompson, but they're not very agile, and their communication systems can be disrupted by specific electromagnetic frequencies. Chen had listened to these briefings while watching her people transform their mining facility into a fortress, specifically designed to counter the strengths of their enemies while exploiting their weaknesses. Captain Zeph Ironskill was beginning to understand that her hunters were not, in fact, hunting humans. They were being hunted by humans who understood Draknari psychology better than she had thought possible. Her warriors were being drawn deeper into the facility by human defenders who would appear just long enough to trigger Draknari predator instincts, then disappear into passages that led her troops into carefully prepared kill zones. "Pack Leader S. Seth," she hissed into her communicator, "report your position." "Unknown, Captain. We have been pursuing human defenders through a maze of interconnected buildings. They keep appearing and vanishing. My warriors are becoming frustrated." Frustrated Draknari were dangerous, to themselves as much as to their enemies. When their hunting instincts were triggered but constantly denied satisfaction, they became reckless and stopped thinking tactically. "Withdraw to a secure position and regroup," Zeph ordered. "These humans are using our own instincts against us." But withdrawal proved impossible. Every route that seemed to lead back toward the landing zone was blocked by debris, defensive fire, or obstacles that hadn't been there minutes earlier. The humans were controlling the battlefield with an efficiency that none of the mercenary commanders had expected. Captain Gorvak's problems were different but equally severe. His Brondhen warriors were encountering defensive systems specifically designed to neutralize their advantages. Instead of trying to match Brondhen's strength with stronger fortifications, the humans had created obstacles that turned Brondhen power against itself. His warriors would charge a defensive position, only to find that their momentum carried them into carefully engineered traps. Heavy Brondhen soldiers would smash through what appeared to be walls, only to discover that they had just sealed themselves into chambers where their strength became a liability rather than an asset. "Sir," reported one of his squad leaders, "the humans have constructed the entire facility to channel our advances into specific areas. Every time we break through their defenses, we find ourselves in positions that favor their tactics over ours." Aboard the Blood Harvest, Captain Krexter was reviewing tactical reports from all of his ground commanders with growing disbelief. 800 of the galaxy's most experienced warriors were being systematically outmaneuvered by a few hundred humans defending a mining facility. "This is impossible," he declared to his command staff. "Humans are not capable of this level of tactical sophistication." His tactical officer was scrolling through sensor data, trying to understand what was happening on the planet below. "Sir, I'm detecting extensive underground activity throughout the facility. It appears the humans have created a tunnel network far more complex than our initial scans indicated." "How complex?" "Sir, I think they've connected everything. Every building, every defensive position, every piece of equipment. The humans aren't defending individual locations. They're defending the entire facility as a single, integrated fortress." Krexter stared at the tactical display showing Kepler 442b's surface. What he had thought was a simple mining facility with scattered defensive positions was actually something unprecedented. An entire human settlement that had been transformed overnight into a fortress, designed specifically to counter the tactics and abilities of the forces arrayed against it. "Get me Commander Chen," he ordered. The communication was answered almost immediately. "This is Commander Chen. How can I help you, Captain Krexter?" Commander, your forces are fighting well, but this engagement cannot continue indefinitely. I have 7 more fleets in orbit, and I can bring down enough firepower to reduce your entire facility to rubble. There was a pause, then Chen's voice returned, still calm and professional. Captain, you're absolutely right. You could destroy the facility, but that would destroy the quantum crystal mining operation that your employers want to capture intact. And it wouldn't eliminate our tunnel network, which extends far beyond the facility itself. Crexter felt the first stirring of real concern. Explain. We've had 200 years to study how other species conduct warfare, Captain. We know that mercenaries are paid to capture assets, not destroy them. And we know that your contracts probably include penalty clauses for excessive collateral damage. She was right, and Crexter knew it. The Hegemony Trade Consortium wanted the mining operation intact and profitable. Destroying it to eliminate human resistance would violate the terms of their contract. Commander, he said carefully, what exactly are you proposing? I'm not proposing anything, Chen replied. I'm simply informing you that you've encountered something new. You've met humans who have decided not to give up and who have had time to prepare. I suggest you consider whether this contract is worth what it's going to cost you to complete. The transmission ended, leaving Crexter staring at his tactical displays and realizing that his understanding of human capabilities might have been seriously flawed. The evacuation of the first wave had been a disaster that none of the mercenary commanders wanted to discuss in detail. Of the 800 elite warriors who had landed on Kepler 440 2b6 hours earlier, only 430 had made it back to the extraction zones. The rest were either dead, wounded, or trapped somewhere in the maze of tunnels that apparently honeycombed the entire valley. Captain Crexter stood in the conference room of the Blood Harvest, facing holographic projections of the other mercenary commanders. The mood was significantly different from their confident planning session the day before. The humans have turned the entire mining facility into a fortress, he reported to the assembled captains. But it's not a fortress designed to withstand siege. It's a fortress designed to trap and eliminate attackers while remaining invisible to orbital reconnaissance. Captain Zeph Ironskill's image flickered with agitation. My hunters are reporting that the tunnel system extends beyond the mining facility itself. They've connected the industrial complex to natural cave systems in the surrounding mountains. Captain Gorvak's massive form leaned forward. My warriors encountered defensive positions that seemed designed specifically to counter Brondhan tactics. The humans knew exactly how we would attack and prepared accordingly. That's impossible, interjected Captain Anthara, her spider-like form shifting nervously. Humans have never fought against Zellerian coordination tactics before. They cannot have prepared specific countermeasures. And yet, said Captain Crexter grimly, they did exactly that. My tactical staff has reviewed the engagement recordings. The humans demonstrated specific knowledge of the combat capabilities, weaknesses, and psychological profiles of every species in our combined force. The holographic conference fell silent as the implications sank in. The mercenary companies prided themselves on their specialized combat abilities. Each species had evolved unique advantages that made them supremely effective in their chosen roles. The idea that a single human commander could develop countermeasures for all of them simultaneously was deeply disturbing. Captain Vexai of the Centaurian Void Dancers spoke for the first time. His species was known for their ability to analyze and predict enemy behavior with mathematical precision. Captain Crexter, have you considered that this might be a trap designed specifically for our combined force? Explain. The contract specifications were unusually detailed about which mercenary companies would be hired for this operation. The client specifically requested representatives from 8 different species with complementary combat capabilities. Crexter's mandibles clicked slowly as he processed this information. You're suggesting that the humans knew we were coming. I'm suggesting that someone wanted these particular mercenary companies to face these particular humans under these particular circumstances. The question is why. Down on the planet's surface, Commander Chen was asking herself similar questions. She stood in the primary command center deep beneath the mining facility, surrounded by displays showing the current positions of both human defenders and mercenary forces. Ma'am, reported Lieutenant Morrison, The enemy has withdrawn all ground forces to their landing zones. Long-range sensors show they're bringing down additional equipment. Chen studied the tactical readouts. The mercenaries had clearly been shaken by their first encounter with prepared human defenses, but they weren't withdrawing. Instead, they appeared to be regrouping for a more systematic assault. "What kind of equipment?" she asked. "Heavy siege gear, tunnel-penetrating sensors, and what looks like mining equipment of their own." Morrison paused, consulting his displays. "Ma'am, I think they're planning to come at us from underground." Chen nodded. She had expected this development. The mercenaries had discovered that surface assault was ineffective, so they would logically attempt to neutralize the human advantage by fighting in the tunnel systems themselves. "Signal all teams to initiate Phase 4, she ordered. Major Rodriguez looked up from his communications console. "Ma'am, are you sure? Phase 4 is irreversible." Chen looked around the command center at her staff. They had been fighting for nearly 12 hours, and everyone showed the strain. But their eyes were still alert, still determined. "Major, these mercenaries came here expecting to face a standard human colonial defense force. They thought they were fighting 300 Marines protecting a mining facility. It's time to show them what they're actually facing." She activated the facility-wide communication system. "All defenders, this is Commander Chen. The enemy is preparing to engage us in the tunnel systems. You know what this means. We are no longer simply defending our positions. We are now defending our home." Throughout the underground complex, the message was received by human defenders who had been preparing for this moment. Military personnel, mining engineers, equipment operators, maintenance workers, and administrative staff. All of them had spent the past 18 hours training together, planning together, and preparing to fight together. What the mercenaries didn't understand was that they weren't facing a human military unit that happened to be stationed on Kepler 442b. They were facing an entire human community that had decided to make this planet too costly for anyone to take by force. The second assault began at dawn of the following day. This time, the mercenaries had brought heavy tunneling equipment capable of cutting through solid rock. They would bypass the human tunnel systems entirely by creating their own passages directly to the mining facility's most valuable areas. Captain Krexter led the assault personally, accompanied by 100 of his best warriors equipped with specialized underground combat gear. Their plan was to tunnel directly to the Quantum Crystal Processing Center, secure the most valuable part of the operation, and force the humans to surrender or lose their primary asset. The tunneling operation proceeded smoothly for the first several hours. Krexter's engineers carved a passage through the bedrock beneath the valley, bypassing all known human defensive positions. Sensors detected no human activity along their route. "Excellent progress," reported his chief engineer. "We will breach the processing center foundation within 2 hours." But when they finally broke through into the basement level of the processing center, they found something unexpected. The chamber they entered was occupied by a single human figure, an elderly man in mining coveralls who appeared to be calmly reading a book while sitting on a chair in the center of the room. "Surrender," Krexter ordered in Galactic Standard, his translator converting his words into human speech. The old man looked up from his book and smiled. "Oh, I don't think so. You gentlemen are trespassing on human territory." He had a slight accent that Krexter didn't recognize, and he seemed completely unafraid of the 100 heavily armed Vorthak warriors who had just burst into his chamber. "You are vastly outnumbered," Krexter pointed out reasonably. "Resistance is futile." "Son," the old man said, closing his book and standing up slowly, "I've been mining asteroids since before your species had space travel. I've faced down pirates, claim jumpers, and corporate raiders, and I've never once met a problem that couldn't be solved with the right application of explosives." It was then that Krexter noticed the detonator in the old man's hand. "My name is Frank Morrison," the human continued conversationally. "I'm the chief mining engineer for this facility, and you boys just tunneled directly into the primary storage chamber for our mining explosives." Krexter's enhanced vision detected the chemical signatures around him. The chamber walls were lined with enough high-grade mining explosives to level several city blocks. "You would kill yourself to stop us?" he asked, genuinely confused by this development. Frank Morrison shrugged. "Son, I'm 78 years old. I've got grandchildren back on Earth who are going to inherit a galaxy where humans are either respected or pushed around. Seems to me that's an easy choice. Wait, Crexter said quickly. We can negotiate. Oh, I'm not going to blow us all up, Morrison interrupted. That would be wasteful. I'm just going to collapse your tunnel and seal you in here with us. He pressed the detonator. The explosions were precisely shaped and carefully calculated. Instead of destroying the chamber, they brought down the tunnel that Crexter's forces had carved, sealing the 100 Vorthak warriors inside the processing center with no way out except through the human defensive networks they had been trying to avoid. Similar scenes were playing out across the entire facility as other mercenary forces attempted their own breakthrough tactics. Each assault team found that the humans had anticipated their approach and prepared appropriate responses. Captain Zeph Ironskull's hunters, attempting to infiltrate through natural cave systems, discovered that the humans had spent the night booby-trapping every passage with devices specifically designed to counter Draknari sensory abilities. Captain Gorvak's heavy infantry, trying to smash their way through the facility's foundation walls, found themselves trapped in chambers where their strength became a liability and their size prevented effective maneuvering. Each mercenary force was being systematically isolated and contained by human defenders who seemed to know exactly what tactics would be employed and exactly how to counter them. The truth was both simpler and more complex than the mercenary commanders imagined. Commander Chen hadn't predicted their tactics through superior strategic thinking. She had relied on something much more fundamentally human. "Ma'am," reported Sergeant Williams from his position in the communications center, "we've now got 5 separate mercenary forces trapped inside the facility. They're contained but not eliminated." Chen studied the tactical displays. Casualties. Minimal on both sides. The containment chambers are designed to hold them safely until we figure out what to do with them. This was the part of the plan that Chen hadn't shared with anyone except her senior staff. The human defenders weren't trying to destroy the mercenary forces. They were trying to capture them. "Signal all teams," she ordered. "Begin Phase 5. Throughout the facility, human defenders began moving toward the positions where mercenary forces were trapped. But instead of heavy weapons and assault gear, they carried medical supplies, food, water, and translation equipment. Captain Crexter received his first indication of what was happening when human voices began speaking to him through the chamber's communication system. "Captain Crexter, this is Commander Chen. You and your warriors are now prisoners of the Human Colonial Defense Force. Under the terms of the Galactic Convention on the Treatment of Military Prisoners, you will be provided with food, water, medical care, and reasonable accommodation until this conflict is resolved." Crexter looked around the chamber where his warriors were trapped. It was large enough to accommodate them comfortably, had adequate ventilation and lighting, and appeared to be equipped with facilities designed for long-term occupation. "Commander Chen," he spoke into his communicator, "what are your terms for our release?" "That's an interesting question, Captain. What were your terms for the conquest of this planet?" Crexter considered this. The mercenary contract had specified complete elimination or evacuation of human forces, seizure of all mining assets, and establishment of hegemony trade consortium control over the quantum crystal operation. "You cannot hold us indefinitely," he pointed out. "Actually, I think we can," Chen replied. "You see, Captain, you've encountered something that most species in the galaxy don't understand about humans. We're incredibly patient when we need to be, and we're very, very stubborn when someone tries to take something away from us." Over the next several hours, similar conversations took place between Commander Chen and the other captured mercenary commanders. Each of them was discovering that their warrior cultures, optimized for quick victories through superior force, had not prepared them for dealing with humans who simply refused to be conquered. Dr. Patricia Yamamoto, the expedition's xenobiologist, had spent the night researching not just the combat capabilities of the various mercenary species, but their psychological and cultural characteristics. Her findings had been incorporated into the human defensive strategy. "Vorthak society is based on personal honor and martial prowess," she had explained to Chen during the planning phase. "They literally cannot comprehend the concept of surrender to an inferior opponent, but they can accept being outmaneuvered by superior tactics." Draknari culture revolves around the hunt, she had continued. They're psychologically incapable of withdrawing from pursuit of prey, but they can be redirected or contained if they believe the hunt is ongoing. Brondhen's social structure is based on dominance through physical power. They'll fight until they're physically incapable of continuing, but they'll respect opponents who demonstrate superior strength through unconventional means. Chen had listened to these briefings and realized that the mercenaries weren't just individually trapped in physical chambers. They were trapped by their own cultural assumptions about how warfare was supposed to work. "Commander Chen," came a transmission from one of the mercenary ships in orbit. "This is Captain Vexhai of the Centaurian Void Dancers. I request permission to negotiate for the release of my colleagues." Chen had been waiting for this. The Centaurians were known for their analytical approach to problem-solving, and she had expected them to be the first to recognize that the situation required diplomatic rather than military solutions. "Permission granted, Captain Vexhai. What are you proposing?" "A complete withdrawal of all mercenary forces from the Kepler 442b system, cancellation of the Hegemony Trade Consortium contract, and payment of reparations for damage to your facility." Chen smiled. "That's an interesting starting point for negotiations, but I think you're misunderstanding the situation." "Explain." "Captain, you and your colleagues came here expecting to conquer a human colony. Instead, you've discovered that humans don't fight the way you expected. What you're experiencing isn't a military defeat. It's a first contact situation." The communications channel fell silent for several long moments. "Commander Chen," Captain Vexhai said carefully, "what exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying that the galaxy has been underestimating humanity for 200 years. You've all been thinking of us as weak mammals who got lucky with technology. But what you've encountered here is what humans actually become when we decide that something is worth fighting for." Chen paused, choosing her words carefully. "Captain, your mercenary companies are among the most feared military forces in the galaxy. You've conquered hundreds of worlds and defeated dozens of different species. And yet, in the past 24 hours, you've been systematically outmaneuvered by a few hundred humans defending a mining facility." She activated her communications system to broadcast to all the mercenary ships simultaneously. "Gentlemen, ladies, and honored beings, I suggest you consider what this means for any future contracts that involve fighting humans. Because what you've experienced here is just the beginning of what we're capable of when we're properly motivated." 3 days later, the mercenary fleet remained in orbit around Kepler 442b, but the nature of their mission had fundamentally changed. What had begun as a straightforward conquest operation had evolved into something unprecedented in galactic mercenary history, a negotiation for the release of captured forces who had been outmaneuvered by an opponent they had grossly underestimated. Commander Chen stood in the main conference room of the Mining Facilities Administration Building, which had been hastily rebuilt after the orbital bombardment. Around the table sat holographic projections of the 8 mercenary captains, along with representatives from the Hegemony Trade Consortium who had finally arrived to assess their failed investment. "Let me make sure I understand the current situation," said Consortium Representative Valkneth, a thin, gray-skinned bureaucrat whose species specialized in interstellar commerce. "You hired 8 of the most prestigious mercenary companies in the galaxy to secure a single human mining operation, and they are now requesting negotiations for the release of their own forces." Captain Krexter's holographic image shifted uncomfortably. The proud Vorthak warrior had spent 3 days as a prisoner in what he had discovered was actually a quite comfortable detention facility that the humans had constructed overnight specifically for captured mercenaries. "Representative Valkneth," he said carefully, "the situation is somewhat more complex than our initial intelligence indicated." "How complex?" Commander Chen leaned back in her chair and smiled slightly. "Perhaps I can clarify the situation. Representative Valkneth, your consortium hired these mercenary companies to remove human presence from Kepler 442b so that you could claim the quantum crystal mining rights. Is that correct?" "That is correct." "And the assumption was that human colonial forces would be unable to resist a combined assault from 8 different species known for their military prowess. A reasonable assumption based on previous human military performance in similar situations." Chen nodded, I thought so. Representative Valknith, are you familiar with the concept of human nature? The bureaucrat's thin features showed confusion. I am not certain what you mean by that term. I mean the tendency of humans to become significantly more dangerous when someone tries to take something away from us that we consider ours. Chen gestured around the conference room. 50,000 humans live and work on this planet. They've built homes here, started families here, invested their lives in making this place successful. When your mercenary friends arrived to remove us, they weren't facing a military garrison. They were facing an entire community that had decided not to leave. Captain Zeph Ironskill spoke up from her holographic projection. Commander Chen, you must acknowledge that your tactics were highly unconventional. No species in the galaxy fights the way your people fought here. That's exactly my point, Chen replied. Most species develop military doctrine based on their natural advantages. You fight the way your evolution optimized you to fight. But humans learned warfare on a world where we weren't the biggest, fastest, strongest, or most dangerous species. We learned to win by adapting our environment and our tactics to counter opponents who were superior to us in every measurable way. She activated a display showing the tunnel system that had been constructed beneath the mining facility. Captain Ironskill, your hunters are incredibly skilled at tracking and eliminating individual prey. But humans learn to fight in groups, using tools, changing the battlefield itself to suit our needs rather than adapting ourselves to the battlefield. The display shifted to show the defensive modifications that had been made throughout the facility. Captain Gorvak, your warriors are nearly unstoppable in direct combat, but humans learned long ago that the secret to defeating a stronger opponent is to avoid fighting on their terms. Captain Gorvak's massive form leaned forward. You are saying that human military doctrine is based on cowardice. Chen's expression became very serious. Captain Gorvak, in the past 3 days, how many of my people have attempted to escape or surrender? The Braun-then captain considered this. During his time in detention, he had observed human activity throughout the facility. Despite being outnumbered by the mercenary forces and facing potential orbital bombardment, not a single human had abandoned their positions or attempted to evacuate. None, he admitted. Human military doctrine isn't based on cowardice, Chen explained. It's based on the understanding that sometimes the only way to win is to refuse to lose. We don't fight the way you expect because we learned warfare from a position of disadvantage. Representative Valknith was reviewing data on his personal display. Commander Chen, even if your tactical performance was superior to expectations, you cannot hold our contracted forces indefinitely. The legal implications alone. Actually, Chen interrupted, I think we need to discuss those legal implications in detail. Sergeant Williams, would you please bring in our legal consultant? The human who entered the conference room looked distinctly different from the military personnel and civilian workers that the mercenaries had encountered during the fighting. She was older, professionally dressed, and carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to winning complex negotiations. This is Dr. Margaret Stone, Chen announced. She's a specialist in interstellar law and formerly served as legal counsel for the Human Colonial Development Authority. Dr. Stone activated her own holographic display, showing a complex legal document. Representative Valknith, I've had 3 days to review the contracts between the Hegemony Trade Consortium and the various mercenary companies present. I've also researched the legal framework governing territorial disputes in this sector of space. She highlighted several sections of the displayed documents. The mercenary contracts authorize the use of force to eliminate human presence on Kepler 442b. However, human presence on this planet was established under Section 15 of the Galactic Colonial Development Accord, which grants settlement rights to any species that establishes productive operations on previously unoccupied worlds. Valknith's expression showed growing concern. The consortium's claim to this territory predates human arrival by 18 months. That's correct, Dr. Stone agreed. However, the consortium's claim was never formalized through productive use of the territory. Under interstellar law, unused territorial claims expire after 2 standard years unless development begins. She activated another display. Human mining operations began 2 years and 6 months ago. This means the consortium's territorial claim had already expired when we established our settlement. The implications of this struck the conference room like a physical blow. Representative Valknith stared at his legal documents as if they had personally betrayed him. Furthermore, Dr. Stone continued, by hearing mercenary forces to attack an established human settlement, the consortium has committed an act of unprovoked aggression against the human colonial government. Under the terms of the Galactic Peace Accords, this constitutes a war crime. Captain Crexter's mandibles clicked nervously. Dr. Stone, are you suggesting that we unknowingly participated in illegal military action? I'm not suggesting it, Captain. I'm stating it directly. You and your forces have committed acts of war against a legally established human colony based on falsified territorial claims. The conference room fell silent as the mercenary captains absorbed this information. Their species might be warriors, but they were also professional soldiers who understood the importance of legal contracts and legitimate authority. Captain Vexhai was the first to speak. Dr. Stone, what are the legal remedies for this situation? Under interstellar law, the human colonial government has several options. We can demand reparations for damages. We can file war crimes charges against all parties involved. Or, she paused significantly, we can negotiate a settlement that recognizes the legitimacy of human territorial claims in this sector. Commander Chen leaned forward. Representative Valknith, here's what I'm prepared to offer. The human colonial government will drop all war crimes charges and release all captured mercenary personnel in exchange for formal recognition of human territorial sovereignty over Kepler 442b and a public acknowledgement that the Hegemony Trade Consortium's territorial claims were invalid. Valknith looked as if he had aged significantly during the course of the conversation. Commander Chen, such an agreement would require approval from the Consortium Council. The political and financial implications are significant, Chen agreed. But consider the alternative. War crimes trials for 8 prestigious mercenary companies and a finding that one of the galaxy's largest trade organizations attempted to steal territory through illegal military action. I imagine the damage to the consortium's reputation would be considerably more expensive than acknowledging a legal mistake. Captain Crexter spoke up. Commander Chen, assuming this legal settlement is reached, what assurance do we have that humans will honor such agreements in the future? Chen smiled. Captain, you spent 3 days as our prisoner. How were you treated? Crexter considered this. The human detention facilities had been clean, comfortable, and adequately supplied. Human guards had been professional and respectful. Medical care had been provided for wounded mercenary soldiers. Despite being enemies, the humans had followed the letter of interstellar law regarding treatment of prisoners. We were treated according to established conventions, he admitted. That's because humans understand the importance of law and established procedure, Chen explained. We prefer to win through superior planning and execution rather than through violation of accepted standards. She stood and walked to the window overlooking the mining facility. Captains, I want you to understand something important. What happened here wasn't just a military engagement. It was a demonstration. For 200 years, most galactic species have considered humans to be weak, disorganized, and unsuitable for territorial expansion. She turned back to face the holographic projections. What you discovered here is that humans can be incredibly organized when we need to be, and we become extremely dangerous when someone tries to take something away from us. The question is whether the galaxy wants to learn this lesson the easy way or the hard way. Captain Zeph Ironskull's forked tongue flicked out thoughtfully. Commander Chen, are you suggesting that human military capabilities have been deliberately understated? I'm suggesting that human military capabilities have been misunderstood, Chen replied. Most species fight the way their evolution programmed them to fight. Humans learned to fight the way we needed to fight to survive against opponents who were bigger, faster, and stronger than us. She activated a display showing the defensive modifications that had been made to the mining facility. Captains, everything you encountered here was built by mining engineers, equipment operators, and civilian technicians in 18 hours. We didn't use advanced technology or secret weapons. We used intelligence, cooperation, and determination. And if similar situations arise in the future, asked Captain Gorvak. Chen's expression became very serious. Captain, I hope they don't. I hope the galaxy learns to work with humans through negotiation and mutual benefit rather than attempting conquest. But if similar situations do arise, I suggest you remember what happened here." She gestured around the conference room. "You came here with overwhelming force to remove what you thought was a weak human presence. Instead, you discovered an entire community that had decided to defend their home. Think about what would happen if someone threatened a human world with millions of inhabitants, or if humanity as a species decided that we'd had enough of being underestimated." The implications hung in the air like a physical presence. The mercenary captains were beginning to understand that their defeat at Kepler 442b wasn't just a tactical failure. It was a revelation about human potential that would fundamentally change galactic power dynamics. Dr. Stone activated a new display showing legal documents. "I've prepared a settlement agreement for your consideration. The terms are quite reasonable, considering the circumstances." Representative Valknith reviewed the documents with growing resignation. The agreement acknowledged human territorial rights, provided reparations for damages, and included provisions for peaceful trade relationships in the future. "This settlement," he said slowly, "will require the consortium to acknowledge publicly that we made a legal error." "Yes," Chen agreed, "but it will also establish a precedent for how territorial disputes involving humans should be resolved in the future, through legal channels and negotiation rather than military force." One by one, the mercenary captains indicated their agreement to the settlement terms. They were warriors, but they were also practical beings who understood when continued fighting would be pointless. Captain Krexter spoke for all of them. "Commander Chen, we accept your settlement terms, but I have one question for my personal understanding." "Of course." "How did you know? How did you know that we would employ the tactics we used, that we would make the mistakes we made?" Chen smiled. "Captain, we didn't know your specific tactics, but we knew that you would think of us as weak opponents and plan accordingly. So we prepared for everything we could imagine, and we made sure we could adapt to anything we hadn't imagined." She paused, then added, "That's what humans do, Captain. We prepare for problems we hope we'll never face, and we never assume that our opponents will be as weak as they appear." 3 days later, the mercenary fleets departed Kepler 442b, carrying with them a new understanding of human capabilities. Within weeks, the story of the failed conquest had spread throughout the galactic mercenary networks, along with a simple message: contracts involving humans require additional consideration and significantly higher compensation. The Hegemony Trade Consortium quietly modified their territorial acquisition procedures to emphasize legal research and negotiated settlements over military solutions. And on Kepler 442b, 50,000 humans continued their work of building a new world, knowing that they had demonstrated something important about human nature to the galaxy at large. Commander Chen stood on the observation deck of her rebuilt command center, watching the mining facility return to normal operations. The quantum crystal extraction continued, but now it proceeded under the protection of interstellar law and with the grudging respect of some of the galaxy's most feared warriors. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Morrison approached with a communication tablet, "Earth Command is requesting a full report on the engagement. They want to know how we managed to defeat 8 mercenary companies with 300 Marines." Chen smiled, watching human civilians and military personnel working together to repair the last of the damage from the mercenary assault. "Tell Earth Command that we didn't defeat them with 300 Marines, Lieutenant. We defeated them with 50,000 humans who decided not to give up." She turned away from the window. "And suggest to Earth Command that they might want to reconsider their assumptions about what human colonies are capable of when properly motivated, because I don't think this is the last time someone is going to underestimate us." As the suns of Kepler 442 set over the valley, where humans had proven that they could not be easily conquered, the galaxy began to adjust to a new understanding of what humanity represented in the complex balance of interstellar power. The age of underestimating humans was officially over.